Welcome to HOA Story Speaker, your daily destination for powerful, shocking, and real-life inspired HOA stories.
Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. You wake up on a cool Tuesday morning, pour your coffee, and step outside to enjoy the view you have known your whole life. Instead of birds, you hear the harsh growl of concrete mixers disappearing down the road. That is exactly what Art Miller saw when he looked down his driveway and realized the only way out of his property, the historic Old Creek Crossing, had been sealed off by towering gray concrete barriers. This was no accident and no misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attack by a corrupt homeowners association that decided Art's 60-year family legacy did not belong in their $15 million fantasy neighborhood. The smell of fresh cement still floated in the fog, thick and choking. But the situation was far worse because Art's mother, Nana Rose, was diabetic and needed dialysis that very morning. His teenage daughter, Sophie, was trapped at home with no way to reach school, and even ambulances could not get through. The HOA claimed it was for urgent structural repairs, but Art knew the truth. This was the final move in a calculated plan to crush him until he sold his $3.2 million land for next to nothing, clearing the way for their elite expansion. What they did not expect was that they chose the wrong farmer to threaten, because Art had cameras running. 2 years of records, a hidden weapon buried in paperwork that would not only reopen the road but send the HOA's queen straight to federal prison. Art Miller never imagined he would be fighting for survival at 52. He was the third-generation owner of Miller's Orchard, 15 acres of rolling hills lined with heritage apple trees planted by his grandfather, Silas, back in the 1960s when the region was nothing but dirt roads and honest labor. Grandpa Silas had even paid out of his own pocket to help build Old Creek Crossing, the stone bridge that connected their hilltop refuge to the county road and became part of the family's identity, smelling of apple blossoms in spring and echoing with boots on gravel. It was rural America preserved in time, with the family still living in the original Victorian farmhouse, its worn siding sheltering 5 generations, including Art, his wife Elena the school nurse, their soccer-loving daughter Sophie, and Nana Rose, who at 78 remained the heart of the home despite failing health. But as always, progress arrived with money and erased everything in its path. 10 years earlier, a developer called Summit Heights Luxury Living bought the surrounding 200 acres and flattened history to build $47 million mansions. Overnight, Art became an outsider, surrounded by people who saw his organic farm not as a source of food but as a stain on their perfect lawns. These residents created the Summit Heights Association and claimed control over the shared private road and the old bridge Art's family helped construct, twisting vague 1962 easement documents into a legal weapon. Then came the villain, Patricia "Patty" Vance, the living embodiment of an HOA nightmare. Imagine a retired pharmaceutical executive with stiff sprayed hair, dressed in spotless designer tennis clothes, driving a white Tesla as if she owned the asphalt itself. She moved in with an attitude that said she was in charge and ran for HOA president, winning uncontested after intimidating the rest into quitting. Her campaign began with complaints about the smell of compost, the scent of real farming, and certified letters warning about property values. Anonymous noise reports followed about tractors running at 7 in the morning because farming offended her yoga routine. Soon she escalated, parking her Tesla at the bridge, tracking Art's movements, photographing delivery trucks, measuring tire widths and recording every imaginary violation of made-up rules. Then she hired the law firm Sterling & Stone, known for crushing ordinary people, demanding Art prove legal road access within 30 days or face termination, which meant being locked in. Art tried to cooperate, offering to pay for maintenance, but Patty smiled coldly and said, "This isn't about money. It's about what's best for the community," making it clear his family did not belong. That was when Art began recording everything. During one heated call, he overheard Patty speaking to a man named Greg about completing Phase 1 and removing the last obstacle to unlock $15 million in development. The night before the bridge was blocked, Patty held a secret emergency meeting without inviting Art. The next morning, the barriers appeared, trapping his family. Nana Rose missed dialysis, Sophie was marked absent, and Art understood this was no disagreement, it was a siege. 2 days later, a 14-page legal threat arrived from Sterling & Stone, costing more than his tractor, accusing him of damaging community infrastructure with commercial traffic. They attached photos of tire marks as proof, but Art saw the tracks belonged to the HOA's own construction trucks that placed the barriers. They gave him 21 days to fix the violations or lose access forever, which meant selling the farm or going broke. While Elena kept the orchard alive and Sophie took on extra chores, Art spent 2 long days in the dusty county records basement, breathing in the smell of old paper and hunting for a miracle. Under flickering fluorescent lights he finally found it. The original easement deed from 1962 was written in plain language and clearly stated that the Miller family had permanent vehicle access for both farming and living on the land. Even better, it included a clause requiring maintenance costs to be split according to actual use. As he studied the financial records, Art discovered the HOA had been overcharging commercial trucking companies and quietly keeping the excess money. He brought in Martha Lewis, a chain-smoking, iron-willed local attorney who despised HOAs even more than she despised taxes, and she immediately filed a quiet title lawsuit and demanded a forensic review of the HOA's suspicious $180,000 yearly road budget. That was when Art followed the money and uncovered the smoking gun. The HOA had submitted the same repair bills to two separate accounts, charging both residents and the Summit Heights Luxury Development Fund, effectively stealing $45,000 through outright fraud. Patty's response was fast and ruthless. She hosted another gathering at her mansion, pouring imported wine while scheming to crush a family that had lived there long before she ever arrived. Flyers appeared in mailboxes claiming Art's organic fertilizer was dangerous to pets, using long-distance photos that made compost piles look like radioactive waste. Then came the mental warfare. Bright LED floodlights were installed at his gate, aimed straight at his home, turning peaceful nights into something like a prison interrogation yard, with the buzz of electricity replacing the sound of crickets. But Art was thinking several moves ahead while Patty was playing a simple game. Trail cameras hidden in the woods caught board members sneaking around his property after midnight, and his farm stand became a center for information as supportive neighbors quietly shared what they knew. One afternoon, Mrs. Higgins, a gentle retired teacher, approached him shaking with fear and whispered that Patty was planning something far bigger than just the road. She was right, because the next morning Art found his tires slashed in the school parking lot while attending a parent-teacher meeting. The smell of fresh rubber hung in the air, and security footage showed a white Tesla nearby only minutes earlier. Art understood then that this was no longer just about land rights. It was about whether a corrupt board could intimidate an American family into abandoning its legacy. He began sleeping with a baseball bat. Elena changed her driving routes daily. Even the sound of gravel crunching outside made the whole family freeze. But Art had one secret Patty did not know. He had recorded every conversation, saved every threat, and built a case that was about to shatter her privileged world. The fight shifted from physical harassment to bureaucratic pressure when Patty Vance turned the government into a weapon, unleashing inspectors, code officers, fire marshals, and environmental agents who all arrived within a 2-hour window. Carrying clipboards and identical safety complaints, they demanded Art obtain a commercial agricultural permit for a farm that had been operating since the Cold War, a permit costing nearly $3,000 plus a required $15,000 environmental impact study. He was given 45 days to comply or face daily fines that would destroy him. But Elena, using her sharp nurse's instincts, searched social media and found the connection. Patty's LinkedIn showed close ties to 3 county officials, and Facebook photos showed her drinking wine in Napa with the county commissioner's wife just days before the crackdown. Martha Lewis filed a selective enforcement complaint immediately, noting that many other properties had the same issues but were never cited, and she demanded every email between the board and the county. The records were devastating, revealing that Patty had been courting these officials for months with dinner parties and charity galas, and one email even stated they needed to make Art so miserable he would accept any offer just to escape. Then came the turning point. Mrs. Higgins risked everything to bring Art a phone recording she had made by hiding her device under a pillow during a strategy meeting at Patty's house. The audio was clear, capturing Patty discussing Phase 2 pressure tactics and coldly describing a plan to force Art to sell at 40% below market value so they could flip the land to Greg for the full $3.2 million. Art knew the name Greg. He was the developer contact. This was a coordinated plot to steal millions. Patty then targeted the most vital resource, water. She created a fake drought emergency to pass HOA restrictions, cutting off Art's irrigation in the height of summer, and suddenly the main line to his property developed mysterious maintenance problems. Without water, his crops would die, his restaurant contracts would collapse, and he would be ruined. But Art did not plead. He quietly hired a drilling crew and sank a new well on his own land, fully legal and completely independent from the HOA. The sound of that drill tearing through bedrock at 6 in the morning was the sound of freedom, and it drove Patty into a rage. The community lines hardened as Patty's supporters blocked the farm stand with their cars, and Sophie was isolated at school, excluded from parties and punished for her parents' fight. But the breaking point, the moment that turned this from a legal war into something personal, came when someone sprayed industrial herbicide along Art's property line in the middle of the night, killing the prized heritage apple trees planted by Grandpa Silas more than 60 years earlier. Art stood there the next morning with the sharp chemical smell of death in the air, touching the shriveled branches that felt like family, watching Sophie cry and Nana Rose stare silently from her wheelchair. That night, Elena found Art sitting in the dark, looking at old photos of the trees in bloom, and he whispered, "They are not just trying to push us out, Elena. They are trying to erase us." That act of environmental cruelty backfired badly. Images of the dead trees spread across the town, uniting people behind the millers. But Patty doubled down, calling Art's restaurant clients and spreading lies about food contamination, forcing them to cancel their contracts. And cutting the farm's revenue by nearly 70% overnight. Then the insurance strike followed. Art's coverage was abruptly canceled over so-called high-risk concerns. That same morning, a fire inspector showed up demanding $25,000 in mandatory upgrades. Elena soon uncovered that Patty sat on the board of the insurance company's parent firm. Another conflict, another layer of corruption. It all peaked with a late-night dumping operation captured in crystal-clear footage by Art's security cameras, showing trucks marked with the Summit Heights logo spreading construction rubble, broken concrete, rusted rebar, and chemical waste across his organic crops. Patty tried to rewrite the story, filing reports that Art himself was operating a hazardous dump site. But Mrs. Higgins' network and Art's video evidence proved the debris came straight from the developer. Meanwhile, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been quietly assembling a case from the material Art kept sending them. They noticed $400,000 in wire transfers from the developer to Patty's consulting company, payoffs disguised as legitimate business. Then Mike Ross, a neighbor who had finally had enough, stepped forward with a video of Patty handing out $10,000 cash envelopes to HOA board members. The pressure was mounting, but the damage to the family was devastating. Nana Rose's heart was weakening from the stress. Sophie's grades collapsed, and Elena secretly began searching Zillow listings in other states, afraid the villains might actually win. One night, Art found her in the laundry room, crying while holding Sophie's jersey and whispering, "What if she wins, Art?" That was the moment Art Miller stopped playing defense. He assembled his war council at the kitchen table. Martha Lewis, David Chun the forensic accountant, and Elena managing the media. They planned a 72-hour legal blitz. Martha's paralegal uncovered a forgotten clause in a 1962 road contract. If maintenance costs ever exceeded 300% of the original estimate, adjusted for inflation, control of the road would revert to the county. Patty's HOA was spending 847% over that limit. Even worse, David Chun revealed that the contractor, Valley Infrastructure, was owned by Summit Heights, inflating bills by 400% to launder money. That meant the county was now responsible for blocking Art's constitutional rights. And because Nana Rose was disabled, federal civil rights violations were now in play. But Art still had one final card. The original environmental impact study for the luxury project had excluded his 15 acres. By attacking him, Patty forced a new review. Art's land, with its rare ecosystem and heritage orchard, was home to protected bird species, triggering a federal environmental investigation that would halt the entire development for at least 18 months, destroying the construction loans and bankrupting the developer. As the town hall meeting approached, destined to be the final showdown, Art stood on his porch breathing the night air still tinged with chemical fumes from poisoned trees. He knew Patty was desperate. She tried to have him arrested on fake terror threats, paying a kid to place false calls, but the kid confessed immediately to the FBI. She even sent someone with bolt cutters to sabotage his irrigation system, unaware she was damaging federally monitored equipment. A felony. Everything was ready. The trap was set. The Riverside Community Center overflowed with people. Standing room only, charged with the nervous electricity of a championship fight, with CNN and Fox cameras lining the walls, lenses locked onto the stage like sniper scopes. At exactly 7 p.m., Patty Vance entered under federal escort, dressed in her trademark tennis whites, now made absurd by the bulky ankle monitor on her leg. Her face was hollow with defeat. Art stepped to the podium, scanned the crowd, and delivered the line that would dominate the news. 2 years ago we thought we were fighting a neighborhood bully. Tonight you'll see we were fighting organized crime. What followed was total destruction. Giant screens displayed David Chun's charts exposing $60 million in fraud, played recordings of Patty discussing bribes and kidnappings, and then the final blow, footage of developer Greg Pierce being arrested at his office just hours earlier. An FBI agent took the stage to announce the largest rural property rights conspiracy case in history. 37 defendants, 214 victimized families, and prison sentences measured in decades. The crowd exploded in a raw roar of justice that shook the building. Patty's empire collapsed in real time as 3 board members resigned live on television. But the decisive strike came when the EPA declared permanent federal protection for Miller's Orchard, meaning the land could never be developed, preserving Grandpa Silas's legacy forever. Even Nana Rose wheeled herself to the microphone to remind everyone that in America, you should not need the FBI to protect you from your neighbors. Patty Vance received 32 years in prison. Greg Pierce was sentenced to life without parole under RICO laws. Summit Heights liquidated its assets to fund a $20 million victim compensation program. 3 months later, the concrete barricades were removed and replaced with an open stone bridge. Art stood in the orchard, now peaceful, listening to the birds that had returned. Sophie earned a scholarship to study property law, inspired by the battle. Elena launched a foundation to help other farmers. They had won. But one question still haunted him. Art Miller had to become a warrior to save his home. He had to destroy careers, send people to prison, and uncover a massive conspiracy just to live in peace. Is it truly justice if you have to burn everything down to achieve it? Or does the system only work for those brave enough and lucky enough to strike first? What would you have done? Tell me in the comments.